All right, guys, first and foremost, I just want to make it very clear this might be a little bit more rambly than usual. I'm not going to take a ton of time to kind of cut together audio to make it sound a little bit more coherent, and I'm also not writing a script for it. For the most part, in the future, I'm going to start writing scripts for everything, especially for this series. But when it comes to this news and everything else that's going on in the world, it's just, I couldn't bring myself to put it out all on paper. Obviously, you guys saw the title, you saw the thumbnail. Now, Lionsgate, Twisted Pictures, they're pushing back Spiral, the 9th entry in the long-running Saw franchise, to May 21st, 2021. Instead of getting it sometime in the fall, like Halloween weekend or something else like that, they've decided to push it even further than that. Not just even the fall, but the winter months. I've argued on this channel from time to time that it should come out in January. I've had arguments with people in the comment section about how January is just throwaway month for literally everything in Hollywood's garbage can. And while that is true historically, it has been true for this and for other Halloween features and fare, yes and no. It's really complicated to go in right now. I don't really have the facts and figures in front of me, but just to say that, ever since 2007, 2008 and 2009 or whatever, like horror movies especially, the idea of opening movies in February and January, it's not as bad as it used to be. So I've always kind of figured that the Saw franchise might end up there at some point, but there's a lot to take away from this. First and foremost, it's just so unbelievably disappointing for anyone like myself, and I'm sure anybody listening to this, about this movie being pushed off an entire year. The biggest reason for most people, I'm sure, is because we really wanted to see this new movie. Not just okay, yes, it's a new Saw film. Great, that's great. I've written an entire script, 2 scripts really, over 2,000 words about this, about why I'm excited and what I feel like this franchise could become in the future, and how all of this really works together, and how, even though I'm a little bit disappointed that it's kind of giving away or taking away a lot of the stuff that was set up in Jigsaw, the new direction could be very beneficial for the future of the franchise and give it a lot of ground to step on, as opposed to a lot of its other contemporary horror movie franchise counterparts. Like something like Jason or Freddy, who have kind of been lingering for the last decade with absolutely nothing to say because they're not relevant anymore. Or maybe even Michael Myers, because we all know the whole thing about Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and then Halloween Ends, later this year and then later next year, and how the Saw movies have kind of shied away from that because of the massive success which was Halloween 2018. And if you've been following this channel for any real length of time, you know that I'm just not a fan. So yeah, there's just a lot to take in here. Another reason I feel like I personally am very disappointed about this, and I'm sure you guys, a lot of you who are listening to this and the frequent commenters and listeners of my channel would know, the idea that we're being pushed 1 year back from Saw 9 and a potential 1 year back from Saw 10 or 11 or whatever else like that. And the idea that this movie, we're not entirely sure how it's connected to the broader mythos of the entire series. We don't know how this is going to affect any plans that they had for the future of the series. There were things floating around recently about how they were looking to do a television show. Josh Stolberg, who is the writer of Jigsaw and Spiral, or one of the writers, said that he would really like to see the continued story of the Jigsaw thing with Logan and Eleanor and John and just everything related to that, and tell the story that they were really planning and hoping to tell for Saw 9 before Spiral became a thing. Being pushed 1 year back, to me, it does, and I hate to say it. I don't want to curse in here. I really hate to say this. It does mean that Tobin Bell is 1 year older, and I wish him the best and perfect health. I mean, he has created an icon of the horror franchise, just being his own charismatic presence and really, just on screen, not that much makeup, and playing a character that has really touched the horror community in a major way over the last, almost 2 decades at this point. And there are very few people who can say that. I mean, Michael Myers is a shape. Jason is just a monster at this point. Freddy Krueger is an amazing personality, but one of the things that allows him to be such is the suspension of disbelief that this guy can kind of invade your dreams and do whatever he can. Chucky, in kind of the same way with the voodoo and everything they do with that. Pinhead is kind of also the same thing. Ghostface really isn't anybody, neither is Leatherface. I mean, when it comes to horror icons, yeah, like Tobin Bell, the Jigsaw Killer, like that guy is literally within a league of his own. And the idea, at least one of the things that was floating around for the sequel to Jigsaw, not Spiral, but what they wanted to do before this was it was going to be heavily focused on John. And if you've been focusing on this franchise for a very long time, you know that even though Saw 6, and I feel like one of the reasons Saw 6 was such an amazing film in its own right was because John was such an intricate part to the story that they were telling. One of the reasons I feel like Saw 3D really didn't. He wasn't a huge part of that film. In fact, he was really an afterthought, and that's one of the reasons I don't like it as much as I really would like to, even though I do have a lot of good things to say about it. I'm sure, even though we've talked about it a little bit on this channel before, I will cover it later in the Real Take series for anyone who hasn't seen it or doesn't want to go through my backlogs to listen to all of the videos that I've made about Saw, because I know there's a lot. So yeah, and it's also like he's also one of the reasons why Jigsaw really picks up and is worth rewatching multiple times is when he shows up at the end, the charisma that he brings to the role of John Kramer and just the screen presence, it really elevates the film, even if you think that it's not really holding its weight on its own. Knowing that he's connected to the grander story that they're trying to set up really does bring it home. And not having him in this movie was always a blow to any confidence that any major fan has had that I've ever talked to, but at the same time, it's interesting and you really want to see where they bring it. The fact that he's getting a little bit older, and I know I'm getting way off topic. Like I said, it's going to be a little bit rambly for anyone who's just dealing with this the same way I am here, but the fact that he's getting older, to me, it seems like a distinct possibility that are we ever going to get that conclusion? Are we ever going to get that story that they wanted to tell with him as a central figure? At this point, I do not care that it's a prequel. He's been dead for so long in the timeline, and yet you're going to do a prequel with him, and he looks older than he was in the original films. Yada, 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 movie magic. I don't care. I'm willing to suspend my disbelief for that much, especially with a character who's able to plan multiple years in the future about things that are happening. Like traps and people that need to be tested and everything that they've been able to do with his character for the last several sequels. Doing a complete prequel or integral trilogy film would be an amazing accomplishment. And that was the television show that was rumored, if that was the next film or whatever they were going to do in order to tie it into Spiral, or maybe do some extended universe type of stuff. Maybe this puts a huge wrench in that. Maybe it derails that entirely and we're never going to get to see that plan. And you know what? If that's the case, then that's the case. We're all going to have to live with it. We all knew that the franchise would have to continue on in the future because no good horror franchise dies, really, right? It continues on. It finds a way to consistently live. The problem with Saw is, as I said earlier, Tobin Bell is the Jigsaw Killer. He is the face of the franchise, and it's not something you can hide in makeup. It's not something that you can hide behind a mask. It is a charisma, it's a star presence, and it's just a commitment to the role that needs to be explored in every single movie. So just losing that, or the prospect of losing that, or even losing a year or more, really, to the prospect of getting that back in any real meaningful way for the franchise, even though it's going to be continuing, that upsets me. It just really upsets me, and I'm glad I've had at least a minute to talk about it, especially with this new news. But I want to move on because I've taken way too much of your guys' time. This is just such a ranty video, I know, but I want to give a little bit of encouragement to this news. In fact, a huge win I think that we're getting right now is the fact that Lionsgate and Twisted Pictures are deciding that Spiral is a good enough film to release next May. I know a lot of people are going to jump at me in the comments if I don't say it, so I'm just going to have to say it. Yes, they are still running away from the Halloween trilogy. I don't really quite understand why. It's not completely clear at this point whether or not Halloween Kills is going to have to be pushed back or not. And if it is pushed back, then I can understand what they're doing, and maybe they know something that I don't. But I am just going to say it. I don't think Halloween Kills is going to show very competent legs going into this Halloween season unless it literally is the come back to the movie theaters, America and the world type of movie, especially in America and Canada, because that's the only way I see multiple people flocking to the theaters to see a mainstay, an American icon, the likes of Michael Myers, somebody that we have known since 1979, for God's sakes. A franchise film that everyone wants to cathartically watch, a horror franchise, a killer that we all know and love and respect, and it's not something that's invisible, something that really comes at you, scares you, gets you feeling, or at least allows you to work through all of the internal fears that you've been looking at over the last couple months. And I'm not just talking about COVID-19, I'm talking about, all the joblessness and everything else that's going on in the world. Like, maybe that's a cathartic sense that we all need to get around, and that's why Halloween Kills, if it releases in October, is going to be a huge success. But if movies come back more in advance than I'm predicting, or it gets pushed back an entire year into October 2021, and Halloween Ends gets pushed back into 2022, and more movies come out before that, including Spiral, and people get over this pent-up need to go out and experience things the way they used to back in the long-forgotten days of 2019, then I'm just sorry. I think the nostalgia has worn off with the Halloween franchise. I don't think people are going to flock to it in the biggest ways that they did back in 2018 because they've kind of already seeped that well dry. There's really a reason why they decided to do a trilogy. First and foremost, shoot it back to back and understand that this thing is going to end at some point. Literally giving it the ending title because, there's nothing really to do with Michael Myers. It's very boring, honestly, and there's not a whole lot there. Oh God. We're how many minutes into this? Oh God, it's gotten way off track. Okay, let me get back on track. I just wanted to say that, yes, there are some silver linings here. One, they think this movie is good enough to go to screen. So in order to put this into context, and something I've been wanting to talk about a lot right now, is there is this inner war happening between theaters and studio chains that you might have been following, you might have not been following, pretty much all circled around Universal and their release of Trolls 2. Trolls World Tour or something, whatever. I don't know. I never saw it. I didn't rent it. When the first Trolls came to theaters, it was a bigger success than anyone really thought it was going to be or really even should be at the time. And that in and of itself wouldn't be that big of a deal if it wasn't for the global pandemic. Once all the theaters started closing down, one of the things that studios, especially Universal, started doing was putting all of the movies that were in theaters at the time onto VOD and rental options that people can get for $20 a pop, right? And one of the things that the theater owners said, especially AMC, who has gone after Universal for everything that they've done recently, is that, yes, we understand what the studios are doing here. They really don't have any other choice. We have these contracts that allow us about 4 or 5 months exclusivity on their properties before they're allowed to put it on home video or digital release or something else like that, and that's what keeps the business churning. And at the same time, we're gobbling up about 50% of the profits that are brought in the box office sales, right? It's not the best type of relationship, but it was one that was harmonious for several years, decades even, between the studios and the theater chains. The problem that we're seeing right now is that Universal now put out the Trolls movie, which was scheduled to open during this pandemic. And because of that, we don't know all the details, but it's likely that AMC, Regal, Cinemark, and all the other movie theater chains that you might frequent from time to time already had contracts with Universal to play it in however many screens across country, or maybe even in an individual movie theater. But because all those theaters were closed at the time that the movie was supposed to release, Universal decided to kind of circumvent those contracts, void them, and then release the movie on VOD. The reason they decided to do this was because, one, they need money coming in. Literally, if nobody has money coming in, everyone is hurting. The problem is that the theaters don't have money coming in, and if the studios circumvent them, no one's going to be happy in the theater chains. That's what we're going to talk about in a minute. But Universal decided to put it on VOD for people to get for $20 a pop, and it became a huge success. At this point, must have immediately made over $100 million. The difference between the theater chains and the VOD is that the theater chains are allowed to keep around 80% of the profit of the $20 per pop. And most people get to get the $20 per pop and keep it for a rental period of about 48 hours. Say if you have a lot of kids and it's a kids movie like Trolls, then kids can watch it 5 or 6 times. Within that, the parents have something to keep the kids busy, and it's just a really good deal for the parents. So yeah, it was a good deal for the audience and the studio alike. And even though Trolls did make less money theoretically than its predecessor, it still made just as much, if not more, than what the studios got to keep from the profits of the last movie. You can see where we're going with this. Theoretically, because of Trolls, it might be more profitable for the studios to put out a high-profile movie of theirs onto VOD and collect more of the incoming profits, especially from a pent-up audience who really wants new, original, and in-demand content, something like Spiral, in order to bring in money for the entire studio. But the wrinkle in all this is that AMC and even Regal, who has kind of walked it back but is kind of straddling the line, has decided to ban, or at least stick their chest out enough to say that they're going to ban all Universal movie releases from now on, because they circumvented those original contracts for the Trolls movie that was supposed to release earlier this year. So there's a lot of stuff going on here. I've taken up way too much of your time. Even Universal has come out and said that while they want to have their big budget movies still open up in theaters, they are not giving up on the concept of VOD for various pictures like Trolls 2. And even Warner Brothers has taken Scoob, which was supposed to open the exact same day as Spiral. They've taken that off the release calendar indefinitely, and they're bringing it to digital and VOD and even home release literally on the exact same day. So that's going to be the one to watch, in my opinion. One, it was kind of supposed to open, and now it's really going to be opening around the exact same time Spiral did. And it was also a much bigger gamble for the studio because Warner Brothers was trying to make a Hanna-Barbera universe there. I'm not super clear on the details, but it's going to be really interesting to see how that one fares. Yes, it's kid material, and theoretically, it makes a lot more sense for families to rent out for 48 hours kids material than it would to just purchase a $20 horror movie. But if you have multiple people in your house and you really all want to see it, or you're like me and would love just to pay $20 to see Spiral on May 15th, let alone wait an entire year to see it in theaters, then it does make sense. I would even buy it on Blu-ray. I would do everything that I could to support that film. So yeah, that's going to be the kicker. But if AMC does stand up to Universal and says, Fast and Furious, the Jurassic Park 3, Jurassic World 3 movie that you're going to be putting out, those Lego movies now that you're going to be putting out, the Minion movies, all this other stuff, no more. I don't care what you want to do. You screwed us, and we're going to take away a huge chunk of your revenue source. Go try it on your own if you think that you can survive without us and the experience that we provide. Then maybe it's a good bet. But at the same time, if people, after all of this, decide that it's just far more financially responsible to pay $20 to see a movie as many times as you want in 48 hours, maybe Universal has a point there. I guess this is a huge off the topic. My God, guys, don't let me talk this much unless you really want to. Tell me in the comment section below if you want more videos like this, because it's really all over the place. Anyway, we don't have enough information right now to say whether or not Spiral would make more money or less money if it was released on VOD this month, let alone being released in theaters next year. It's really up in the air about how much Lionsgate needs the revenue flow right now. And then putting up Spiral for May 2021, at least to me, says we don't need the revenue flow right now. This is something we're very much committed to, and we think it's going to do better in the theaters. We're not even putting it in its most prime spot at this point. We are putting it back in the date that we wanted to put it in the first place. That's huge, guys. I really think that speaks volumes to what they believe this movie is capable of doing and its quality overall. And if there's one really solid reason that's devoid a little bit of any articulated thought from not writing a script out for this, I would have to say that is what makes me the most confident about this movie more than anything else, is that there is starting to be legitimate data with, even though vague threats from various theater chains, that data might show that the short-term profits and long-term effects of releasing the movie this month or even next month or October on VOD or whatever it might be, if we're all stuck here for various months, it might be way more beneficial and not that big of a blow to theaters in the studios and just everything that they have built up right now. And yet they're trying to put this movie in a very prime spot for 2021 because they believe in it. And honestly, I think I believe in it too, because it's going to be really interesting to see how it all plays out. But I'm still very disappointed with the fact that we're going to have to wait an entire year for everything that I've said in this video. And at the same time, I think that them doing this is a huge vote of confidence and a boom to the quality of this movie and everything they expect from it. So I think as fans, we should all be way more excited than we otherwise were for the release that was supposed to happen in just a couple of days. Because to me, this could only mean that it's good. So I'm sorry I took so much of your time for all of that. I will write scripts in the future, but I hope everyone is having a fantastic day. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. You hit that bell over by the subscriber button if you want more content like this, as we talk about, now that we have an entire year to talk about the Saw franchise and speculate on this movie and just in general everything. We're going to do Sawtober this year again as well. There's a lot more to come, so I hope everyone is having a good day. It's been real.